Well, Deltarune Chapter 5 is less than a year away. It's kind of hard to believe that we're getting the next chapter so early, especially with there being over 3 years of waiting for every other one. Before Chapter 3 came out, I made a prediction video on what I think is going to happen in that chapter. I was entirely wrong, but you know, it's pretty fun to make predictions regardless, even if they might not come true at the end of the day. So I figured with Chapter 5 literally right around the corner, why not make another prediction video? There's a lot more to go off of this time around in comparison to my last video, so if it makes you feel any better, we do have at least some consolidation in some of these predictions being right. These predictions are just going to be my overall thoughts on personally where I would take the story next. So keep in mind, I'm not saying that any of these have the possibility of being right. These are just what narratively makes the most sense to me. In fact, there's actually a couple of predictions that the greater Deltarune fandom has made for Chapter 5. Predictions that I specifically want to go over because they make the most sense. They're predictions that I agree with, so I figured I should talk about them. Let's start off with the location of Chapter 5. This chapter is very clearly going to be the chapter when the hometown festival is going to take place. I mean, we see the setup for it in Chapter 4, and the narrative is very clearly hyping it up. So I'm primarily expecting Chapter 5 to be extremely Light World centric, perhaps as Light World centric as Chapter 4's was. I believe the first part of the chapter is primarily going to be the festival. Something goes wrong in the festival, so Kris and Susie are forced to enter a dark world at some point to make sure that the festival can continue without any potential danger. I'm fully expecting that Susie and Noelle will see even further character development during this time at the festival, perhaps during another Ferris wheel scene due to the foreshadowing in Chapter 2. And I also believe that Noelle is going to join us in the Dark World this time around, which I'll explain why I think that she'll join us later in the video. For now though, in terms of the Dark World location, Gerson basically gave us a concrete answer. In his secret battle in Chapter 4, Gerson describes all the locations and events from Chapters 1 through 4. He then claims that Chapter 5 is going to be the quote, field of pink and gold. At face value, most people can put together that this is what the Dark World is going to look like, but more clever fans have probably put together that the field of pink and gold might have more meaning to it. Remember this guy? Yeah, they appear not only at the beginning of Chapter 3, not only in the ERAM fight, but also in Chapter 2. They've been a pretty prevalent being that we keep seeing in this game, but we still have never got any concrete answer as to who they might be. The most iconic feature though is that a lot of people mistake them for Spamton, mainly because of their yellow and pink eyes, but nope, this being is completely different. Wait, yellow and pink? Like, the field of pink and gold? Okay, you get where I'm going with this. If an entire chapter is based around the two colors of pink and gold and this mysterious character's primary design is pink and gold, I think it's fair to expect that we're going to find out what this mysterious character is, because it's one thing if they appeared once, but Deltarune keeps showing them so often, it makes sense that their constant appearance is foreshadowing their future involvement in some capacity. And that's the most obvious things that the fandom has come up with about Deltarune's future going into Chapter 5. So now I think it's time to make some actual unique predictions that you may not have considered yourself. Ones that I've been thinking about in my head for a bit now, and I'm really excited to get them out there to the rest of the community. And since you've made it this far, why not hit the subscribe button? I make weekly Undertale and Deltarune content, so hey, if you're into this franchise and want to hear me autistically ramble more about the universe, then feel free to stick around, because I have a perfectly normal obsession with this game. During the Gerson fight, Gerson gives explicit details of every chapter in his quote Lord of the Hammer book, which is directly inspired from the prophecy. He describes each chapter we've played so far with exact locations and plot details. However, once he gets to Chapter 5, not only does he describe the location of Chapter 5, but he also talks about the plot as well, calling it quote Inferno of Jealousy. This could either be an allegory for something we've yet to understand, or it could be taken as literal. If it's taken as literal, we can make some educated guesses of what this Inferno of Jealousy is. The best bet we have so far is the dynamic between Toriel and Asgore's relationship. They're both clearly divorced. But you know, Asgore very much wants their relationship back to normal. However, when Toriel is around Asgore and Deltarune, she very much conveys a sense of being uncomfortable when around him. In addition, Toriel very clearly seems to have gotten to know Sans extremely well. So much so that she's bringing him over to her house, getting drunk with him, and staying up for long periods of time. It would make complete and utter sense for Asgore to be jealous of those two, especially because of a secret cutscene in Chapter 4 where Asgore receives a black shard. The same kind of item we received after beating the royal growing night in chapter 3. Asgore even claims that his hope for using the Black Shard is to use it to turn everything back to normal. So I think it might be safe to assume that Asgore might play a key role in chapter 5 in some capacity. Especially because in addition to Gerson describing the plot as an inferno of jealousy, Gerson also mentions how the location of this dark world is meant to be a garden. So it's a garden of pink and gold? I mean, there's not a garden in the light world, unless of course you're talking about Asgore's flower shop. Yeah, no, the place that makes the most sense to become a garden if a dark world is formed there. You know, cause it's a flower shop. Okay, yeah, no, Asgore is definitely about to see a tragic fate, isn't he? Of course, that explains why Asgore is working for Carol. He wants the family to come back together just like how it used to be. However, have you ever stopped and thought about what would Carol stand to gain from all of this? Well, it's clear that the Knight, whoever they may be, has a clear interest in taking Toriel. That is until Undyne appeared and the Knight ended up taking her to the bunker instead. Whether Carol is the Knight or not, it's clear she has some sort of involvement in the narrative based on her interactions with Kris. So it's likely if Carol is the Knight or is working with them, that she would want to use Asgore's jealousy as a moment to strike and fully kidnap Toriel. It's clear that us and Susie will do everything we can to make sure that the Knight will never get their hands on her. So if they can't take her by force, perhaps it's better to be tactical about it. Exploit the weakness that is Toriel and Asgore's relationship, and when both of their guards are down, kidnap Toriel. Speaking of Asgore and Toriel, it looks like Sans seems to be caught in the middle of their own fights, so I'm fully expecting that Sans is not only going to be a key player in Asgore's jealousy, but also going to be a major plot point in chapter 5. Keep in mind that we are past the halfway point in Deltarune, and after chapter 5, we will be officially arriving at the climax of the game. And we know that at some point in Deltarune, Sans is going to play some sort of major role, just judging based off his secret lab you can access at the end of Undertale. So what better way for Sans to get heavily involved than being caught in the middle of Toriel and Asgore's relationship? It's the perfect segue for Sans to finally see an involvement in the story, but also a perfect way to finally start the preparation for the climax and final plot points of the story. Sans is going to be involved and will get somehow emotionally attached to the Fun Gang. Now that we're arriving at the setup for the narrative's climax, in chapter 5, I am fully expecting the weird route to finally start getting extremely disturbing and seen consistently throughout the story. Okay, I mean, chapter 2 and 4 both have extremely disturbing scenes, but at some point, maybe even in chapter 5, I'm expecting an entire chapter to straight up just be all weird root centric if you've activated it. Not only based off the ending of chapter 4's weird route, where Noelle says she's excited to go to the festival with you, but also Noelle has been seeing frequent changes to her character in the game files as well. Yeah, that's right. You know, armor and weapon descriptions, each of them have some sort of unique dialogue associated with each character in our party, but strangely enough, even if Noelle is absent in chapter 3 and 4, her character is consistently being updated with new dialogue, focused primarily around these new armors and weapons, which means that they are very much preparing for Noelle to return into our party in a future chapter. And if Noelle is implied to be with us during the festival at the ending of chapter 4, naturally it makes sense for her to return to our party in chapter 5 specifically. The festival happens here. Noelle is involved, and if Noelle is involved, in this case implied heavily to be involved, then the weird route is very likely going to continue and enter its most disturbing phases yet. So let's predict something else. A prediction not about the narratives or the gameplay, but rather a prediction on the release date. Anyway, that's enough rambling for today. Thanks for watching. YouTube thinks you'll like this video, so why not see if they're right?